So today I want to look at the chart for Taylor Swift. She obviously just had her newest album released, and it's people have been kind of in a, I don't know, interesting reaction. A lot of people not satisfied at first. It's kind of bounced back and forth. I've kind of mostly been watching from the sidelines. I'm not a Taylor Swift fan. I don't listen to her music. I don't necessarily hate her music, but I'm just pop is not really my style. So I'm definitely not her target audience, is what I'm trying to say. So I don't really have any kind of bias one way or the other towards her, but I've mostly been watching the response to the album on social media, and I thought it would be kind of curious to look at her chart, and a couple things stood out to me between her chart and between the transits. So I wanted to take a look. So that's what we're going to do. Before we dive in, though, there is no confirmed time of birth for Taylor Swift. She did the two charts that, if you were to Google it, that kind of pop up, both based off of biographies that point out the time. They've conflicting times. One is a Scorpio rising chart, the other is a Capricorn rising chart. Personally, I find the Capricorn rising chart very compelling, but since we don't know and it's never been confirmed by her or a family member or anything, we don't have access to a written time somewhere that's more accurate than a book. It's kind of hard to can't look at a chart because it's not going to be reliable if you don't have the birth time. So I set it for 7. Why? Because that gives us a Sagittarius rising, and that's her sun sign. So I'm going to look at this from the aspect of her sun. And there's a reason why this is still going to work in terms of what we're going to look at. So for any chart, the ascendant is going to mark the rising sign, right? The first house. And that will always be the framework through which a person operates. So if you have an earth sign, for example, if you have Capricorn or if you have Taurus, you're going to operate on that framework that those signs represent. But wherever your planets are is going to be the places in the chart where you add emphasis that kind of denote how the actual houses, the rulers of the houses kind of operate, and so on. Additionally, we can look at a planet, say in this case the sun, and we can look at the houses that are right from that planet. So say natally Swift or anyone else had the sun in the 5th house. Well, if we wanted to see specific aspects about that sun, how does that person's identity, which is what the sun represents, how does it deal in partnerships? Well, if it's in the 5th house, we would look to the 7th from that 5th house, which would be over here, right? Or what we could do is just simply set it to the 1st house so it's easier to see, and then check and see how everything relates. Because any sign is going to have a relationship to the other signs from kind of a house perspective, and that's what I'm trying to say. So we can set any planet as the 1st house and see what that planet's doing in regards to the other signs, in regards to the other houses, and how the planets kind of operate in relation to that planet in the 1st. Also, as far as a personality goes, the ascendant is going to, like I said, it represents the framework. Everything's funneling through into the rising sign. But from there, you have 2 more layers that kind of are more broad perspective on the personality. That's going to be the sun and the moon. Sun represents our identity, our kind of ego, our consciousness. I also like to think of it as the light that we shine in the world. We have this inner light that we're trying to shine outwards into the world. It's where we put our focus, our attention, and we're really trying to show up in the world. And so for a public figure like Taylor Swift, looking at the sun is going to give us a good sense of who she is and what she's trying to focus on and how she operates more publicly. Now, she's obviously still going to do it from the framework of whatever her rising sign is. And since we don't know that, we can at least get this part of the component correct. We could look at the moon. I did check. It's possible she's a Gemini moon. I don't think that's the case. I think she, at least to the extent that I know about her, I feel like she's probably a Cancer moon. But she'd have to have been born basically at midnight or like 1 o'clock in the morning to be a Gemini moon. Then the entire rest of the day on the 13th she would have been a Cancer moon. So we'll just assume for the sake of this video she's a Cancer moon. That's going to be the one assumption I'm going to make. Otherwise, I do want to just look purely at the chart. Now, the moon represents our subconscious, kind of our internal part of us. I like to think of the sun being who we want to be, who we tend to try to become, whereas the moon is who we really are, kind of at our core, right? Like I said, it's subconscious motivations. But since we're not 100% sure of the moon, and since the moon is more private in nature, and we don't really know the full extent of Taylor Swift's private life, it's better to focus on the sun. So that's why we're going to look at it from the perspective of the sun. So everything in this video is from the sun's perspective, which means in terms of relational stuff, it might not give us the clearest picture, but it is going to tell us a lot about her. So Sagittarius sun, what does that mean? Well, Sagittarius, mutable fire sign. It's ruled by Jupiter. It is optimistic. It's expansive. And the big thing that Sagittarius is trying to do is find meaning. It wants to find the truth. There's two reasons for this. Number one, 4th house represents our home life growing up. It represents our family life, our private life. For Taylor, what did she have? Well, it's Pisces, and that means it was not clear. Why? And it's a Jupiter-ruled sign, but Pisces is a very expansive. It's the deep ocean, basically. You can't really see everything going on in the ocean. And from the outside looking in, it kind of all blends together. Another way I kind of think of Pisces is like a stew, right? Aquarius is kind of more like maybe a soup sometimes, but Pisces more the stew. And why do I say that kind of difference? It's because when you have a stew, what do? You throw all the ingredients in, but then you cook it for a really long time, and all the ingredients slowly blend together until they're not distinguishable anymore. And that's what Pisces does. It takes everything and just absorbs it. It all becomes part of the whole. And so we can't distinguish anything anymore, and there's no longer a sense of clarity. And so for a Sagittarius person, and any planet in Sagittarius has this same issue, the internal world, the private world, the home life, growing up, there wasn't a sense of clarity of different aspects of things. I didn't know what the truth was. There wasn't a clear sense of what was accurate, what was fake. And how that plays out is obviously specific to the person and specific to the context in which they grew up. But there was some element of lack of clarity that kind of drives this person now, where they want to look for it. I need to find this truth because I couldn't find it growing up. I'm genuinely uncertain because everything seems to blend together. And so big quest then for Sagittarius is trying to find this meaning in life, right? Wherever they're going to look for it. Like I said, it depends on what her rising sign is. But the other part of that is the 12th house for Sagittarius is in Scorpio. And Scorpio is about intimacy. It's about intensity, depth. Scorpio really wants to single in and fixate on something and hone in on it and study it all the way through so that I can figure out how to get it or get to it or accomplish it. And the 12th house is a house of the unknown. It's things that are subconscious. We don't innately understand these things. And so for Sagittarius, then you get a lack of understanding of how to deeply study something, to intimately connect to something, to know it all the way backwards and forwards. So you combine that with somebody who's already growing up with a kind of a lack of clarity. In this case, in terms of what identity, So for a Sagittarius sun, they're going to explore and try everything, lots and lots and lots of experiences in an effort to understand, right? In an effort to find the truth, really drill into it. I don't know how to do this consciously, so I'm just going to explore everything, and at some point, all this multitudes of things that kind of blend together will maybe surface and clarify, right? So that's the mindset of what Sagittarius does. Now, additionally, it's got Leo up here, sign of self-expression, the ninth house. Ninth house is where we grow our boundaries, where we push ourselves beyond who we are, right? We travel the world, try new things, we learn new things, we formulate our belief systems, our kind of college education, or learning beyond just practical skills. It's more worldview centric. And so for Sagittarius, it expresses itself through that idea of constantly pushing its boundaries, trying new things. So for Taylor then, she is somebody who, from an identity standpoint, wants to experience a lot of stuff, wants to try to constantly push herself beyond what she knows, what she's capable of, because there's a lack of clarity growing up. I don't know who I am. I don't understand who I am. So I'm going to try and find meaning in an effort to figure it out, right? Find my identity in that method. Now, one of the things in regards to Sagittarius is we look at the second house. Second house deals with our it's the things that support the self, right? So support systems, our family. Right, I said fourth house is family, but this is more like how the family dynamic was. But this second house is more like who are the people in our life that support us, right? If you're older and you have a good family, the family's probably going to support you. If you have a bad family, they're not going to be a part of the second house. Friends, followers, the possessions that we have, the money that we acquire, right? The things that we acquire that support us, as well as our moral character, our ethics, our morality, our virtues. I like to think of the second house as the house of virtue, the 12th as the house of vices, because the 12th house, it's subconscious, but also represents our undoings, the things that trip us up in life. So for Sagittarius, then what does it value? Well, it values Capricorn, which is what? Responsibility, hard work towards the physical world. It wants to build things. And so what and where Sagittarius is going to feel responsible is in building up its support systems, in building up things that can support it, right? And what's the reason for this? Well, if I am trying to find meaning in the world and trying to express that meaning that I have found, then I want to have a stable support system. So I'm going to work my ass off to try and build it up so that I can be as strong as possible. Because going out into the world and trying lots of things is inherently risky. You're going to have a lot of failure when you go out and try everything. That's just the nature of what happens. And so you've got to have a strong internal fortitude in order to do that. So Sagittarius is a very strong sign. It's a very strong sun sign, but it can be a bit chaotic and it can be a bit all over the place. But again, it's that lack of singular fixation that it has. So in her case, what is she valuing? She values what? Money a lot. That's definitely the way her life is played out, a strong pursuit of money. And she's got Saturn in Capricorn. So Saturn rules Capricorn. When you have Saturn in Capricorn, it indicates somebody who's very diligent, very hardworking, is very responsible with how they approach the kind of earthly things that they have duty towards. In her case, money. She's very responsible with her money. She's very hardworking in building up that nest egg that she's built. At this point, she's a billionaire. She's also got Mercury, Neptune, and Uranus here. Now, Neptune and Uranus being in Capricorn, it's not really indicative too much other than she's a millennial. But Mercury here, Mercury is very pragmatic. And I think for her, what this says is, look, the emphasis of how she's trying to express in the world is really intelligent. It's pragmatic. That's the thinking behind it. I'm doing things in a way that's very pragmatic and practical. She's not going to think things through in a way that's whimsical or that's focused on the fun like Sagittarius more wants to do. Instead, her mind is on what's the practical way of doing this? How can I be effective and efficient in order to build up to the goals that I have? So while she may be present herself as a bit more friendly and fun, her mind is not thinking that way. Her mind is always thinking, what's the best approach to build, build, build? Right? It's a mind also on her money, at least from the perspective of her sun. Mercury is also conjunct Neptune. And so this is going to lead to a very idealistic way of thinking. It can at times get bogged down in not being very practical, kind of being more dreamy. And I would say if we look at the lyrics of her music, a lot of kind of that dreamy way she describes things, the kind of stuff she writes about, it's very dreamy. That's very Neptune-Mercury combo, because Mercury also represents communication. And so there's definitely that aspect of it for her. But it's also going to give her a bit of a creative way of approaching things, right? She's thinking outside the box a little bit here with this combination. Now, her moon is in Cancer, and so is Jupiter. Jupiter is what rules Sagittarius. Now, Jupiter is exalted in Cancer, so it's very good Jupiter, except for it's opposite Mercury and Neptune, which is not ideal. And then the moon over here, we don't know if it's at 2 degrees. It's dependent. If either of these rising signs, Scorpio or Capricorn, is correct, then she's going to have a moon that's pretty early. It will be before the conjunction with Jupiter. But it is possible if she's born pretty late at night that the moon is further up towards Chiron. So that is possible, but it's not, I would say, the base case scenario. But for now, again, we know it's in Cancer, so we can at least assume it's somewhere close-ish to her Jupiter. But what does it mean? Moon rules Cancer, so that on its own, it's excellent. It's a very nurturing and soft emotional state. Somebody who can emotionally regulate pretty well, at least kind of only looking at that. Jupiter in Cancer is very empathetic towards other people. It has a strong care for other people. The way Cancer tends to operate is it has this bubble, and everything that it puts in the bubble, it deeply cares about and has a strong emotional connection to. And everything outside the bubble, it's not as concerned with, because it's a mother, right? It wants to focus on the things that are inside its little bubble of motherly care. But when you have Jupiter in Cancer, what happens is it's like you take that bubble and really just start always expanding it outwards. And so it becomes somebody who just has tremendous care and love and empathy for a lot of people. That motherly attentiveness can expand far beyond just the family structure and expand outwards to a lot of people. And so that's one of the beauties of Jupiter here in Cancer. The downside is you get a bit of excess emotion. You get a bit of excess, can be privacy, right? The qualities of Cancer that are more negative can be accentuated, right? This emotionality, this sense of privacy. But the 8th house is where we repress things. It's where we hide things. And so this is, I think, something that's very interesting for Swift, is that she's got Sagittarius sun, but the ruler and the moon are both in the 8th house where they're kind of being hidden. We have things we don't want to. I have feelings and I have beliefs that I don't really want to tell people. Right? Sagittarius normally is going to tell everybody exactly what it thinks about things. But in Swift's case, it's almost like, at least on a professional level, there's certain elements to her that she's not so clear-cut on. She doesn't necessarily want to show them. And it's almost like there's this conflict between wanting to tell everybody everything, right? Because that's the Sagittarius nature. Let me tell you, let me tell you, let me tell you. I think this, I believe this. But the Cancer nature says, no, no, I have to protect. I don't want to share things because if I share, it might give you an opening to wounding me because I'm sensitive, right? So she's this very sensitive person on the inside, but publicly she has to be more open, more optimistic, more fun, more adventurous, and present herself that way and kind of play down, right, and hide this more emotional, sensitive interior. But some of this obviously kind of leaks through a little bit into her writing because, again, that Sagittarius takes over and says, no, I want to tell everybody. She also has Jupiter opposite Mercury. So there's a lot of good ideas, but it's an overabundance of ideas. And I wonder sometimes if she doesn't have good people around her, when you have Jupiter connections to Mercury, especially the hard aspects, the square or the opposition, you get this problem where there might be too much thinking, too much ideas, too much talking. And if she doesn't have people around her that can kind of hem that in and kind of contain it, that might lead to a lot of, I don't want to say missed opportunities, but it's like you throwing spaghetti at the wall, right? You're just throwing everything you can out there, even almost not even realizing most of it's not going to stick, right? But that's kind of what kind of happened. Oppositions also operate as a seesaw. And so for her, there's almost this constant dilemma, this constant swap back and forth between the way I want to think about things pragmatically and the more idealistic, kind of empathetic, I believe, I'm dreaming, right? I'm caring, I'm wholesome kind of person that she is, more private maybe also. The moon, as part of this, is possibly also going to be opposite various things here. I would say, at the very least, we could say probably opposite Mercury, and potentially opposite Uranus. I think if she is Scorpio or Capricorn rising, the Moon-Uranus opposition actually makes a lot of sense. She's had a gajillion boyfriends at this point. She's currently, I think, engaged. I don't remember if they got married yet or not. Travis Kelce, football player. But she has this aspect, right? And it might not be tight if she's born later in the day, but if she's born in the morning, it's a pretty tight aspect of Uranus opposite the moon. And what is that? Again, going back to the seesaw, the moon wants safety, especially the moon in Cancer. It wants to feel emotionally safe, right? And a big part of that for her is from an emotional perspective, the people she wants to relate to, she's looking for what? People that are responsible, that are builders, that are people that are going to build and kind of create that solid framework around that more sensitive moon. And so for her, she wants people in her life that she can relate to who can be a bit more strong, stable, dependable, reliable. But then you get Uranus involved, right? Now you have this opposition where there's this almost fascination, desire to be with people who are quirky, who are a little out of the box. But like any opposition, you swing back and forth. And so what happens is when things get too safe, when things get too emotional, when the depth gets too much, we bounce, right? Uranus wants to break free from any constraints. And so when you have a Uranus-Moon opposition, there's this constant urge to break free from things if the relationship gets too deep, if the emotional atmosphere gets too overwhelming, gets too feeling of constrained, feels too tied down. And there can be ways to solve this even in long-term relationships. I have this aspect personally. Very tight as well, I might add. But I've been married for 13 years now. Right? It's not impossible to have this and be in a successful marriage. be in a successful relationship long term. But it is something that you have this urge where it's like, when I feel tied down, I want to break out from it. And so it's very common to see this aspect in people who are serial daters, because the moment she feels like things are getting too much, break it off, right? Break free from it. Find an outlet. That's something I think she probably really struggles with, is managing this feel. And the other thing too is, if you get a partner who can't accept this side of you of wanting to be free, wanting to have your own sense of freedom within the relationship, that's going to make it feel even more constraining. And so from the point of her sun, though, the moon is in the 8th house. So like I said, there's an uncomfortability here, both in terms of who she is, how she's operating, but also how she feels about things with the moon, right? There's a level of uncomfortability for her, discomfort, in regards to how her public persona is relative to who she is kind of in private. And she's doing a good job of hiding that, I think, generally speaking. The 8th house also deals with intimacy. 7th houses are partnerships, but the 8th house is kind of the things we share with other people, and that's going to include intimacy. How intimate are we with somebody? Sagittarius rising, and again, this is professionally, right? Think of this more professionally, public image rather than how she relates. Is Sagittarius not really known for being super committed? That's the stereotype. Why? Well, for one, it's got Gemini, which is the most flighty of the signs. But number two, it's because Sagittarius has Scorpio in the 12th house. Scorpio is where you have a deep fixation for something. That's where it's the sign of intimacy. Scorpio wants to be intimate with things, and Sagittarius does not understand that as a base level. It's very subconscious. And so for her, on a professional level, she's going to have a hard time sticking with people, right? What do we see constantly with her? Friends with somebody, when they're no longer kind of useful, dump them and move on. That's that lack of ability to kind of intimately connect with people on a professional level. We also have Aquarius in the 3rd house. 3rd house is kind of people around us, our local space, the world around us, kind of our day-to-day, as well as practical skills, and also deals with communication. She's one of the problems for Sagittarius. It has a tendency to be utilitarian with the people around it, with the stuff around it, right? It's got this Aquarius 3rd house. I am of the people, but not in them, right? I love humans, but hate people. That's a very Aquarian mindset. It wants to serve humanity, but doesn't really want to be a part of it. And so that mindset, that approach, is how Sagittarians tend to operate with the people around them. They're kind of like tools, right? I'm here, I'm with you, I'm serving you, I'm doing things for you, but the moment I don't need you anymore, we don't have a connection, right? And so that's the big hang up. So professionally, she's not super attached to people. She's also got the ruler of the 7th house in the 2nd, so it's inversion. So it doesn't even see it, right? It's for her, the close partnerships always turn back to how do I get more of this 2nd house, money, right? Stuff like that, things that support me. If I'm going to be in a close relationship, it needs to support me. And that just kind of doubles down on the problem that Sagittarius has of not really being super committed to people. Going back to the idea of intimacy, all right, she's got problems there, like I said, because the Sagittarius sun, but also because the moon is opposite Uranus, most likely. But then in addition, there's a wound here, right? You got Chiron there. That's not comfortable. Now, some other things to note in her chart. She's got Mars in Scorpio. This is a really excellent Mars. It is in the 12th house from the sun, though, which is problematic, but it's not super crazy detrimental, I don't think, for her chart. Mars in the 12th is anger issues. And I don't think she doesn't strike me as a super angry person. Maybe it kind of comes out passive aggressively for her, right? Sagittarius is very optimistic, very friendly typically, especially since we're talking about the sun for a public figure. So publicly, she comes off as very friendly, very optimistic, very fun. I'd say that seems accurate. But underneath, there's always kind of this layer of frustration, this layer of anger. What's it from? Well, let's look. What does the sun represent? The father, right? Mars is kind of our sense of action, what we pick up from things. And in her case, maybe that's the connection. Also, if we look again, what's going on? Where's the frustration? It's in regards to what? Eighth house, intimacy, right? Things we get from other people. Mars also rules the fifth house, creative passions, children possibly. Although again, if we're looking at this thinking it more professionally, I don't know that kids would necessarily be there, but her creative pleasures, creative outlets would potentially be things that there might be some frustration over. It's not really she has a lot of interesting stuff. She's a Mars that's not aspecting anything. Her sun is, I thought there was something else. It might be the transit chart. Now, as far as, let's look at Venus and the nodes. And then one other comment real fast about Saturn. One thing with Saturn is represents the common man or common woman, the common people, right? It's very common, represents common things. So it relates to common people. And so in her case, she has Saturn Neptune conjunction. We've got that coming up in Aries. That's actually be real curious to see how this is going to play out for her, because it could be squaring her second house, or at least second house from her sun. But Saturn Neptune combo is kind of the dissolution of boundaries, but also the realization of dreams, manifestation of dreams. It's making the dream world concrete, but it's also dissolving the reality. And so it's kind of this awkward dynamic of both gaining and losing different things. And so for her, there's going to oftentimes be this blurred line between what is real and what is not real, particularly in regards to things that support her identity. But also, there's going to be a sense of going back to that kind of commonness. Is that Saturn Capricorn is very relatable, right? She has kind of a relatable quality to her. In addition, if we look at her Venus is Aquarius. Aquarius is very relatable to the common person. And so when you have Venus there, you get somebody who's naturally very attractive or very easy to get along with the common person. Common people resonate with people that have Venus in Aquarius, or Saturn in Aquarius for that matter, is another excellent aspect in terms of mass appeal. And what does she have? She has mass appeal. She's the most popular artist in the world right now, probably. If not the world, at the very least the US. She's wildly popular. Right? She's one of the biggest names in the industry. So definitely mass appeal from this Venus. But again, what's going on? Emotionally, it's uncomfortable, right? It's in conjunct. Now, it might be the moon might be up here. We don't know. But either way, it's inversion. So her sense of beauty, her sense of values in terms of relating to the world at large, right? Dealing with things, communication, singing, it's not comfortable for her emotionally. So this is a very challenged individual where emotionally she has things she really wants, but from a professional perspective, she's not geared that way. She's not oriented that way. It's all set up entirely irrelevant to how she feels emotionally. So she pushes it down, pushes it down, pushes it down. And she really emotionally wants something here. The nodes are going to be and the nodes are squared by Pluto, which is curious. But she's got, I just had a realization here. She's got the nodes in Aquarius Leo axis. So what is this? South node in Leo is going to be somebody who's, well, what is the nodes? Nodes are the points of the eclipse. South node deals with our, it's about releasing, letting go of something, right? South node wants to let go, to release, but it's also a place of familiarity. It's a place of comfort. It's sort of, it's not emotional comfort necessarily, but it's a place of like our fallback. When things get really crazy, it's like, how do I deal with this? What's the fallback? South node, right? Default state, base level, right? This is an easy place to turn back to and simply say, okay, if I do it this way, I know I can succeed, but it doesn't help me grow. It doesn't fulfill me in life to do this. It's just comfortable, and being comfortable is not growing. And so for her, it's in Leo, which means it's very easy for her to be the center of attention. It's very easy for her to be the one out in front of everybody. It's very natural. In a lot of ways, she'll kind of subconsciously, subtly kind of desire to be that. Also, the North Node being in Aquarius, Aquarius kind of wants to be a part of the crowd. It wants to be its own unique individual within the crowd, but it wants to become part of the crowd. Aquarius is the people. It's decentralized, right? So part of her journey, part of what she's ultimately focusing on learning in life, if you want to put it in that terms, is trying to become part of the crowd, trying to resonate with the common person. And she's a very uncommon person. She's a billionaire. She grew up in a family that was wealthy and got plugged into the music industry very young and never had a normal life, right? At least as far as the rest of us are concerned. She had a very abnormal life. Very few people grow up in the kind of life that she's had, of fame, of stardom. And so for her, there's almost this sense of she has the tools to be this pragmatic businesswoman, right? Combined with an identity that's built around kind of getting out and showing off and being fun and adventurous and optimistic and trying lots of new things and trying to find meaning in the world. But where is she trying to find meaning? Well, it's somewhere hidden, secretive. She's not really showing us what she's actually trying to find. At least not intentionally. She's trying to hide it as best she can. She's trying to hide the way she actually feels about everything. Why does she feel this way? Well, was she pushed into it? If we go back to the nodes and we go look at the 12th house one more time, the nodes are saying, hey, you are this star, you are this, it's natural for you to be the center of attention, but let's move away from that. Let's actually kind of resonate with the average person. Serve society, move towards that, especially in regards to what? Your speech, third house, communication, the people around you, right? And how are you going to do that? Well, Pluto, right? What is Pluto? Pluto is about power dynamics. So who's in charge of this process, right? Somebody. It's not her. If you have Pluto in the 12th house, you don't understand how to be your own agent. You have no agency. You don't understand power, right? Power is somebody else's. And so there's a constant victim mentality with Pluto in the 12th because you don't feel like you control anything, especially as Sagittarius rising, because Scorpio is about self-control. Sagittarius as a sign on its own, if you don't have a good Mars, it's going to be very out of control. That's its tendency. Because Pluto is the sign of, or sorry, not Pluto, but Scorpio is the sign of self-control. And so for Sagittarius, it doesn't understand that sense of intense control, intense depth, intimacy. And with Pluto in the 12th, that just adds onto it. I don't have power. I don't have control. In her case, she's got Mars in Scorpio, which is going to mitigate some of that. She's got a good Saturn. which again is going to help give her a lot of discipline, hard work, effort. She's really going to chase after her goals, but she's not always going to be clear on where those goals are taking her. And she's not the kind of person who really feels like she has a lot of power in pushing her towards the goals she's moving towards. And what are those goals? Well, again, it's moving from a place of I'm the leader, I'm the one in charge, I'm the spotlight, to what? I'm just an average person. And I think she wants to get here, but for her, the big challenge is learning to find that level of control. Am I in control of my own destiny, or is somebody else in control? And I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of her life is, I'm almost certain her life, as far as her kind of early career, getting started in the music industry, is entirely out of her control. It was her dad who had all the contacts, got them set, moved them to Nashville, all that kind of thing. She didn't have control over that. And I feel like in a lot of ways that may have played out for her as she grew up, right? This feeling of I'm not actually in control of my own destiny, right? I'm at the whims of the world. So I'm going to go out and figure it out and be my fun, optimistic self, present myself as such. But deep down, she's, no, I really want to be cared for. I want to be nurtured. I want a family. Right? A lot of her songs are very, I don't know, I don't want to say traditional American dream kind of stuff, but a little bit. What does she want? She wants a dude to sweep her off her feet and have her, suburban middle class family fantasy. That's, if you sum up her songs, that's effectively what they are, it seems like. At least to the little bit I know. I might be way off on that, but yeah, so that's who she is. That's who she is. At least, again, perspective of the sun, right? We don't know her rising sign. We don't know what framework all of this is operating, right? Mars in the 12th house for her. Maybe she doesn't have anger issues because her Mars is not in the 12th house in her actual chart. Maybe she's Scorpio rising or Capricorn rising. She's Capricorn, Mars in the 11th, right? That is, I am chasing after my dreams big time. And I've got my sights set on them and nobody can stop me. But again, that's, like I said, we don't know the framework, so this is for now about as good as we can make it. So let's look at the transit chart, and then we'll kind of look at the transits compared to her chart. There's only a couple quick comments. Album release for her latest album came out at midnight on the 3rd. So what do we got? We can ignore the houses because I know it's at midnight. I didn't know what city to put it in, so I put New York. I think she lives there. Maybe she moved to Kansas City since she's dating Travis Kelce. And I don't actually know where she was. It's kind of irrelevant. It came out everywhere in the world at this particular time. So yeah, I didn't really know how to set a location for this. So we can ignore the houses. I mostly want to look at the actual planets and see. So this was the transits for October 3rd. So if you're trying to pick a date for the release of something, what do you want to focus on? Well, first thing is you always want the moon to be in good spot relative to both the chart and your own chart, because the moon is kind of like the timing essentially, or it deals a lot with the timing. And so we want a good moon and moon in a good phase, right? If you're coming out with something you want to grow, to highlight, you tend to want to do it full moon or just prior. If you're doing something that you want as kind of a, hey, we're closing this down, we're letting it go, whatever, you'd want to do it on a more waning moon cycle. So looking at the moon, right, what is it? It's waxing gibbous. So pretty good moon. Okay, just from a cycle perspective, it's by sign, it is trine to the sun. So okay, that's a pretty good start. However, it's moon in Aquarius, and Aquarius is 8th house from Cancer, from its own sign. So that, okay, not quite as good. Aquarius is also very detached emotionally. And since she is releasing this to the public, the moon is going to represent the public. And so what do you get? Okay, moon in Aquarius releasing it to the public. Okay, but that can also be a lot of divisiveness as to what people think about it. So, because what Aquarius does is it is decentralized and it's eclectic and it wants to take everything and organize it into its own spot. Right? It's about societal structures. And Aquarius can be very opinionated and fixed. So it's not a bad moon, not ideal, but it's not. You could do a lot worse. So that's first thing. Second thing, it's not aspecting anything. I mean, it's aspecting Venus and the nodes via an inconjunction. But from a standard aspect, you don't have a sextile, you don't have a trine, you don't have square opposition. It's not aspecting anything in the chart other than this inconjunction. So that is a tiny bit of a red flag. Now it is 7 degrees from the sun and 7 degrees, 8 degrees from Mercury. That's not terrible, but I don't think that's ideal either. So maybe we could go with that. Personally, I like tight aspects, 3 degrees. Second, this inconjunction to Venus, again, not ideal. Venus is what is pleasing. It's artistic, right? If you're going to release something that's an artistic creation, you don't want to have a Venus that's not visible to the moon, in my opinion. Now, I'm not the best electional astrologer by any means. It's not something I've studied extensively, so I could be way off on this. But as we'll see as we look at Venus, this is an atrocious Venus for the release of some kind of artistic thing. In her case, music. So you've got the moon in conjunct Venus. Okay, not good. It's also in conjunct the south node, which means it's semi-sextile, the north node. So you got the moon in kind of an awkward position to the nodes. That's actually probably better, if anything. But moving back onto Venus, what do we have here? We have Venus in fall, right? It's in Virgo. It's in fall in Virgo. So it's a very weak moon. Why is the Venus in fall in Virgo? Because two things. Number one, I mean, obviously it's exalted in Pisces, but number one, Leo is in the 12th house. One of Virgo's biggest struggles is a lack of a sense of what it is about. Virgo does not understand the idea of self-expression compared to the other signs. It does not understand it. It's a subconscious thing. And since Venus is about value, it lacks a sense of how to express that value, both to other people but also to itself. And so Venus in Virgo tends to be very self-critical, critical of others, and lack a sense of self-worth. And that's a big part of why it doesn't feel like it can love unconditionally or feel loved unconditionally. It feels like it has to work for it because it doesn't understand, hey, I can be appreciated and I can appreciate others. So that's one of the main things. Number two, Virgo's very detail-oriented and prudent. It wants to take a look and figure out all the flaws and fix them. And so when you have Venus here, you get somebody who's fascinated and obsessed with all the flaws in things. And if you're trying to love somebody, you don't want to love them by smothering them with all the flaws you're trying to fix. That's a very uncomfortable thing. And so that is why Venus has a really hard time in Virgo. Because it gets obsessed with the flaws. It gets obsessed with all the little imperfections. So going back to this from an artistic perspective, you've got Venus in conjunct the moon. You've got Venus in fall in Virgo, where it's hypercritical. It's not really got a good sense of value, and it's focused on the flaws. So what does that mean? It means it's uncomfortable for the masses because they're focused on the flaws. And if that wasn't bad enough, we've got Venus moving towards the south node. The south node is about letting go. It depletes things. South node, whenever planets are near it, it lessens them. They get warped and molded down to a lesser extent of what they represent. So if you're releasing an artistic piece, right, a music album, you don't want to have Venus right next to the south node, especially because it's not even past it, it's approaching the south node, which means it's getting worse as it moves towards it. So a disastrous Venus, disastrous for this transit. And that's kind of, to me, the biggest issue with this date that she picked. The moon, okay, on its own. I wouldn't pick it personally. You've got the sun in fall, moon in eighth from its own sign. But in terms of what she's doing, it's, I want a public appeal. Okay, moon in Aquarius, sure. And I want it to, it's air because it's it's music. That makes sense. I get that. That's, to me, okay. That's fine. But the Venus, oof, bad, bad, bad. You've also got Mars in Scorpio. Mars in Scorpio is very intense, very fixated on things, so there could be a lot of fixation on this, right? In terms of how people react to it, how people look at it. And then the other thing too is up here we've got the Saturn-Neptune conjunction. Now I set this for New York City. If I had turned on the angles, Saturn would actually be on the midheaven in this chart. Again, I'm not so certain as to where a good location for this was. If we were to actually use this chart, though, again, Saturn on the midheaven is not good either. So, but I am a little less concerned over that. Last thing, we've got Mercury opposite Chiron. Chiron's a wound. You don't want to have planets getting wounded, as they're, especially one about speech, right? It's a music. We don't want to have a song about music getting wounded, right? That out of the gate says, oops, people aren't going to like this, and it's square Jupiter, right? So all of that emotional empathy going on within the release says, well, we're going to talk about things that are hurtful, talk about things that are uncomfortable, that leave us feeling a little bit, I don't want to say traumatized, but yeah, ouch. Ouch, this is not a comfortable aspect, this T-square. So you've got too much what? Thinking about other people, right? Because it's Mercury in Libra. It's always taking the thoughts of other people in mind. Too much singing about that, perhaps. And we're singing about what? We're kind of dealing with wounds. We're projecting them, right? Oftentimes with oppositions, one is projecting the other. So, yeah, this is not a good chart. Right out the gates. Just looking at this as a transit chart, it's very obvious this was not good for her. But if we look at the combo, so hers is the inner chart, and then the outer chart is going to be the transit chart. And if we look at how it's aspecting her, and again, we don't know her houses for certain. We're just looking at it from the perspective of her sun. What do we got? Well, the moon is exactly on her north node. Curious, okay. That's activating that sense of, I'm trying to do what? I'm trying to appeal to the masses. I'm trying to appeal to the general public. It's also in the third house from her sun. Third house deals with communication. She's trying to communicate what? Her identity, who she is, the light she's shining in the world, right? So the moon is saying, okay, hey, look at me. I can connect with everybody, right? That's what it's trying to say. But this moon is also, because Pluto's squaring her nodes, it's squaring her Pluto. So it's saying, oops, this is going to be something that kind of internally is going to pick up on that sense of agency, that sense of power that she doesn't feel like she understands, and kind of maybe highlight it slightly. Some other things, sorry, this is the first time I think I've looked at this combined. That's actually not too bad. The Mars is trying her Jupiter, right? So the active, the kind of the critique in some ways, the aggression as a result of this is, it's supportive of what she believes, supportive kind of the stuff she's trying to hide. It's almost like this is an album where she's kind of speaking her own mind a little bit, right? Maybe a tiny bit, not a ton. What's the sun doing? Sun is square. What does the sun do? The sun highlights things. So in this case, you have a fallen sun highlighting what? Her mind, her thinking, her idealism, right? That's what Neptune represents in our birth chart, our sense of idealism, the things we idealize, the things we dream about. So this transit chart saying, hey, this album is going to highlight her ideals, highlight the way she thinks and communicates, the pragmatism that she has. But it's also going to highlight what? Her beliefs, right? A little bit. Her empathy, such that it is. And then up here, we've obviously got the nodes. Transit nodes in conjunct the moon, in conjunct her own nodes, Venus in conjunct her own nodes. Otherwise, not really aspecting her chart, which is probably to her benefit, honestly, because otherwise, this, like I said, this is such a disastrous Venus for what she's, for an album release. Yeah. If she had an astrologer, she should fire them and get somebody better, because in my opinion, disastrous for some kind of artistic work. And the other thing too that's interesting is 10th house from the sun. What's going on? Well, 10th house is in Virgo, right? For Sagittarius, that kind of plays out as two things. Number one, Sagittarius mindset is let me explore the world to learn the truth so that I can teach it. That's kind of what Sagittarius is doing. When you explore the world, when you try everything, because Sagittarius always wants to try every experience it can, what happens? Well, you get good at stuff because you fail a lot. When you try lots of things, you are inevitably going to fail. And as you fail, you learn what works and what doesn't work. You learn when to pull back and when to jump forward. And Virgo is what? The mastery. It is an expert at things, and it's very prudent, right? And publicly, what people tend to see with Sagittarius person is that over time they become very prudent and wise. And it's because they have this wealth of experience, right? They've learned how to be a master through sheer experience. And so that's kind of the first aspect. The second aspect, though, is people are going to be really critical. If I'm telling everybody, hey, this is the way to do something, I know because I experienced it, which is what Sagittarius tends to do, the natural reaction is people are going to critique it. Okay, let's put this to the test. So people can be very critical publicly. And so that's what's going on here. We've got this Venus and South Node in Virgo, which is very critical. What's the response, right? We're critiquing. We're critiquing the sun. We're critiquing this light that you are shining, Taylor. And that's what's going on and has been going on in the last couple of days at the very least. Jupiter's over here. She's going through a Jupiter return, or had, I guess it's already passed a little bit, but still in her same house. So on kind of more long term, what is happening for her? Well, she's got Jupiter return going on this year. She's also very soon going to have a Mars return. That's not quite as noteworthy most of the time. And she's got, this is kind of the big one. And this kind of is laid out very, very easily. But Pluto moved into Aquarius, where it immediately was conjunct her Venus. And surprise, surprise, she started dating Travis Kelce. Right? Pluto is going to change things. Pluto's about power, control, and change. People say transformation, but really the transformation that Pluto comes in is it just unearths everything. If you got a garden, you got some weeds going, you can't seem to get them out, what do? You dig it all up, replant everything. That's what Pluto does. It just goes up and churns up all the filth as well as all the good stuff and says, let's start over, replant this because we want to get rid of the filth. And so when Pluto transits a planet, which is a couple year process, it's very slow moving, it's going to go through and really change all the stuff. So for her, relationships, the way she relates, the things she values are under a lot of change right now because they're all getting turned upside down as Pluto's transiting and saying, hey, the way you've been operating in this sphere, as well as the houses it rules, let's change this. Let's figure this out. And a lot of times you see when Pluto transits your Venus, you'll see a lot of change in relationship to, well, relationships. Venus deals with that stuff in relation to love. And like I said, her values. This kind of outer planet configuration, we've got this, that's definitely a subject for a different video, for a different day, but it's going to be going on for a while. In her case, we also have the Uranus trine, so there's going to be sudden things that kind of come about to influence this and kind of help speed up this change as well. And if you're somebody who's got inner planet or got any planets kind of at these early degrees of Aquarius, Gemini, or Aries, you're going to be dealing with a lot of resonant things, maybe obviously different parts of life, depends on what planet it's hitting, but everybody who's got early planets or late, in the mutable signs is going to be feeling some of this kind of big change going on over these next couple of years. So for her especially, this is kind of what she's got going on there. Is we're dealing with this change, right? I think that's pretty much it for kind of major transits. Neptune, Saturn, or at some point over the next several years, she'll get her Neptune square, her Pluto square, because she's a millennial. But that's a couple years down the road, so not important for this chart or for this video. But yeah, that's kind of the main thing as far as her kind of beauty, values, relationships. That's all it's under a lot of pressure right now. And obviously, I hope the best for her. But yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if there's a few more hiccups and surprises over the next year or two in relation to that stuff. So, but yeah, this from a transit perspective, this was not a good album release. Not a good date. She should have picked a different date, in my opinion, because obviously, what was the response? Critique, fixation on it, right? And generally speaking, it's kind of, yeah, it's not great. So yeah, so that's Taylor Swift. If there's anything else, sorry, I'm just checking my notes. Okay, I think that's pretty much it. So yeah, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed.